WNST towel for the Baltimore Orioles up at Yankee Stadium to take on the butt kicking that they took. Now on to the south side of Chicago where the White Sox have been struggling. Paul Scribina covers all things baseball in the Chicago area for the Chicago Tribune, doing a little bit of Cubs work there, a little bit of White Sox also with Notre Dame football, as well as a little NU hoops in the Big Ten. You can follow his journey at Shy Trib Scribina. That's Skribina. He is one of our defending champions. We welcome him back. And you know, you haven't seen a lot of the White Sox, right, Paul? I guess in Chicago, when you're covering baseball, that kind of means you cover the Cubs these days, right?
Yeah, I feel like the last time I saw the White Sox was in spring training, but I think it was a couple weeks ago.
Well, they haven't been home. I mean, it's kind of uncanny that you would play 2/3 of the beginning of the season on the road like this through the first 60 games.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are not following what's going on the field anyway. With the White Sox, they're more interested in the draft and trades and speculation and rumors and things like that. So, I think that being away from home for this long is not going to hurt them.
Well, give me how it got to this point, because they were one of those teams perennially trying hard. I think they entered a couple of these off seasons as a favored, and the Royals kind of came from nowhere. The Tigers have always been spending money and trying to get there. But the White Sox gave it a real effort during the better part of the beginning of the Sale era, and obviously having the sale of Sale in the off season sort of signaled the end, and we're really only in the middle of it at this point. There's going to be a fire sale here the next 5 weeks, right?
I would imagine. I mean, now they're coming back down to earth. They started this season doing a lot better than they anticipated. I think Rick Renneria is a great motivator, and doesn't want these guys are professionals. They want to win, but they also understand that they're a part of something that most of these guys who are with them now are not going to be there. They've handled it pretty well. But I think like you say, the speculation, starting with Sale and Eaton. Robertson's another name that you hear a lot. There's guys that that I think when I watched the Cubs rebuild firsthand, and the White Sox actually started off with an advantage because they had a lot more valuable assets that they could use to get off the ground, to get the rebuild off the ground. So, and they've been smart with the international market. I know MLB's changing their rules this year about signing international players, and Sox basically got a top 5 pick, and I believe it's pronounced Robber. That's what he said.
It's a Cuban kid, right? Second baseman?
Yeah. So, and, they got Mancada in the pipeline. They've got some really good pitching in the pipeline. So, I think it's going to be, it could be an accelerated rebuild. I always say, though, that, it all depends on your player development and your scouting. And the Cubs have great player development and great scouting, but the White Sox are going to get to prove whether or not they do in the next couple of years.
Boy, we're at that point here, Paul, in Baltimore, where Machado's hitting 220, guys are hurt, 2 of their pitchers stink in Tillman and Gausman, so much so that we're questioning their health at this point. And, this is a rare era for the Orioles. I mean, they've never had to do a rebuild because they stunk for 15 years. They were always rebuilding. They were always retooling, and they still have the same owner. The White Sox started this thing in the offseason, and I know it's not the most palatable thing for fans, right? And I think the Yankees fans, even last summer, the Yankees having a sell-off and now reaping some of the rewards of that on the front end. And I think every Orioles fan, every American League East fan is concerned about where the Yankees are. The White Sox, I guess the jury is out, but getting rid of Sale, that's a hell of a statement to your fans. We're going to take a generational pitcher and not re-sign him. Of course, him cutting up jerseys in the clubhouse probably hastened his departure as well.
Well, I happened to be there that day, and I like Chris a lot personally, and I think and obviously he's a lot of fun to watch, on the field. I think that was just a competitive nature in him. He just, he wanted to win. He was very loyal to the White Sox, but he also was very happy to be traded. And I think going back to your point about how it is for fans, I think these days, especially now, you see it. If the front office is honest with the fans and says, hey, we're going to suck for a few years, please bear with us while we try to get better. I think people in general are a lot more accepting of honesty than what the White Sox, I think, had been trying to do in years past, is just, kind of patch something together, and then they'd overpay Adam Dunn, or they overpay LaRoche, or they, trying to go out and get these guys, signing Griffey at the end of his career, I think Alomar a couple of times. I mean, all that stuff, I think fans see through that now, especially fans today are a lot smarter. And if you're honest with them, I think that they'll be a lot more accepting. And I think, with the availability of information, it's a lot easier to follow minor leaguers now, and kind of know who these guys are before they get there. I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, like, you never heard of a guy until he got to the major leagues. It was very rare.
That's what my dad bought the Sporting News, right? And the Sunday
Right.
Sun would have, how the minor league guys were doing. That was sort of the only way to track it, unless Chuck Thompson said something in the broadcast, right?
Yeah, I mean, nowadays it's just, there's people who religiously follow that kind of thing. And I'm not big into prospects. I think there's, more of them fail than not. But, it's certainly encouraging if you're a White Sox fan to see what they're trying to do. And, I think that's all that's all that people really want is they want their team to try to win. And if that means stinking for a few years, then I think fans are willing to accept that.
Well, they had a really weird place the last couple of years, right, where Sale's disgruntled, they're not winning, they've got this special pitcher who had a lot of value, they got a lot of value for him in the offseason, but they also had the LaRoche thing going on there. You talk about a guy bringing his kid to work and people picking up sides. I mean, it was kind of caustic there, even going back to the back end of the Guillen era when it started to fall apart for him after they won the championship, right?
Yeah, I think it's that's why you see a lot of cleaning house. I think with Ventura leaving, and he would have been, as far as what I was told, would have been welcome back. He wanted to leave, but I think the environment became a little toxic, and I think that starts with GMs and managers and people in suits, and it all depends too on what kind of the kind of players you sign. I know I cover the Cubs a lot, and the atmosphere around there, especially last year. I mean, some of the innocence is obviously gone now, but I covered them from spring training through the World Series last year, and the atmosphere and the attitude never wavered. I learned the value of a guy like a backup catcher like David Ross, who when I walked in, I wondered, why does everybody love this guy so much? Like, why did Theo Epstein on down? And when you're around a while, you see what he does to a clubhouse, and you see how he interacts with other people, and you start to understand it's not just about the Chris Bryants or the the Abreu's or whatever, but building the team around the superstars, yes, but you got to have a lot of the other little pieces, which I think the White Sox, that's going to be the biggest challenge. They're going out and getting the big name prospects, but building around those guys is what's going to prove to be, I think, the bigger challenge.
Paul Scribina covers all things baseball in Chicago for the Chicago Tribune. You can follow him out at Shy Trib Scribina. That's Skrbina. He's wherever baseball games being played, and there's always one being played in Chicago. And you spent a lot more time on the north side there. Boy, the Cubs really own that place, right? I mean, I was out there last summer for Pearl Jam at Wrigley Field for a couple of shows, and I went down to the south side. My cousin's in the Hall of Fame, and the statue in center field, and my last name's on the wall and all that. And meanwhile, there's 3,200 people in the stadium on a Sunday afternoon, and most of them are there to get a suntan or get the elotes behind first base. Meanwhile, the Cubs are having parades. They're having all this fun. They're doing the banquet circuit. They're writing books. And then they had to go play this year. And, amidst all of this, speculation, can they win 120 games this year, right? It really has not proven easy. And I think that hangover, and I think part of it is the fans don't even need them to win again, right? I mean, they're sort of all made at this point, right?
Yeah, I think everything, like I said it last year when they won, and before they won, I said if they win, I mean, I grew up around Chicago, and I've followed the team for a long time, and I mean everything's going to change as soon as they win. I mean that's obvious. I think what happens is if you look at it more from a baseball standpoint. I mean, they've made the playoffs the last 2 years. They're very young. Their pitching staff has been worn down. I mean, that's a lot of extra, innings and pitches on their arms. A lot of extra games that they're playing. And then you get to the off season where there really wasn't an off season. They're playing in November, right? And then they're back in Arizona in February. And then in between, like you say, you've got parades and books and movies and appearances and everything else. And it doesn't become, then it's not just about baseball anymore. And, I think the Indians are going through kind of the same thing this year where they kind of surprised some people last year and now they're kind of back down to earth. But the Cubs are in a very bad division. So they still have time to turn it around. And they're also seeing, like I say about prospects, a lot of guys last year, Javi Baez and Contreras and some of those guys, you saw a glimpse of them. Schwarber. Now you're seeing a full season, and that's a whole different story.
Well, the pitching has been the whole different story this year, and those are all veteran guys. And certainly we saw the bat of Jake Arrieta here before he was sent off to Chicago in that deal a couple of years ago. And
what happened to? I don't mean to interrupt you, but what happened to him?
I have no idea, dude. I all 3 times, I can't tell you. I mean, he had stuff when he came up, and there were nights that he flashed it, but most nights he was very nervous with guys on base. Obviously, from a physical standpoint, from the beard to the windup to the delivery to how he pitches in the stretch, all of it changed when he went to Chicago. And I think he talked kind of freely about not really digging the way the Orioles did things here, and I think that's a little bit of an indictment on the Orioles. Look, we're going to see Miguel Gonzalez out in Chicago. They gave him away over $5 million last year after he was a key reason that they were a postseason team 3 years.
And I don't normally, I don't hang out with these guys and don't know these guys, but you mentioned Gonzalez, who might be one of the nicest human beings on the planet.
It really is incredible, right? Like, that's the first thing you see when you spend any time with Miguel Gonzalez is, what a nice guy. What a good guy.
I mean, really, I never profess to know these guys. I don't hang out with them. I don't, he can go home and kick his dog for all I know, but the extended amount of time that I've been around him, in the clubhouse, on the field, just talking and BSing, I mean, this guy, him and Chris Bryant are just 2 guys that, really just, and I don't even really talk baseball with these guys. Most of the time I try not to talk baseball with him, but Miguel is just, the ultimate teammate, the old cliche about all that, and cares. And,
well, what they say is he had good parents, right? Wouldn't that be what you would say about him?
I would guess. I mean, I don't know his parents, but I would guess he was raised the right way. I definitely would say that. But yeah, I mean, the White Sox too. I mean, you look at, you brought up Machado. I mean, look at Quintana this year. They were kind of, hoping that he would get off to a good start so they can go rob some other teams like they did with Sale and Eaton. And that hasn't happened, and that, puts a little bit of a damper on things for them too. And I think at the beginning of the season, the Sox were playing too well, if that makes any sense. I mean, if you're going to rebuild, you don't want to, pick at the end of the first, the middle of the first round. I mean, you want to have a high pick, and that's kind of what I go back to the honesty thing with Theo. I mean, they never really came out and said it, but they did say it. I mean, we're not trying to win, and as a front office, the players are always going to try to do that, but the Sox, I think, now are coming back to where they probably should be, and make no mistake, there's talent on the team. I mean, Avi Garcia is having an all-star season, and there's other guys who their bullpen's been phenomenal.
Well, Garcia is unbelievable, right? I mean,
he really turned it around. I think he for lack of a better term, was lazy in the past. I think he had the talent. He just didn't put in the effort to try to stay fit and eat right. I talked about it's weird. He talks to baseball players about weird things, but I talked to him about his diet and kind of what how important that is for athletes nowadays. And he completely changed his. And he said he was eating steak every night, and now he eats fish. And just weird things like that. As a baseball fan, that kind of stuff is interesting to me to find out. That these guys aren't machines and that they actually have to work for their success. And it's great to see him have it. And I think that's what the White Sox were hoping for when they got him from the Tigers.
Well, it's interesting with any young player, right? Like Machado has made this look so easy that now he's hitting 220 and we're all scratching our heads saying, what's going on? He's got a year and a half left, and much like the White Sox in dealing away Sale the way they did, you'd have to say, well, what would Manny Machado's value be to Major League Baseball if he were dealt 6 weeks from now? And what would the long-term prospects for the Orioles be in 19 and 20 and 21? Especially if they're not going to re-sign him and give him $300 million, which they're not going to give him. So,
well, the example I use is Jason Hayward. When the Cubs signed him, everybody thought they overpaid for him. He had a horrible year last year. Great clubhouse guy and all that. But he had a horrible year. I mean, he's a great defender, but he's a right fielder. And I went and looked back at his career. He's only 26 or 27, but it seems like he's been around forever. But he had a really bad year, I think his second year with the Braves. And it's just not as bad as last year, but it was pretty bad. and he bounced back the following year and had, for him what was an average, above average season for him. So I think guys can come back from it, especially a guy like Machado. I mean, he's just, he's so fun to watch, especially on defense. If I say that about a guy on defense, if you watch you want to like to watch a guy play the field, that guy's really special. And I think I think teams can see through that. And some other teams, they like maybe the Cubs saw something in Arrieta that they could fix that the Orioles didn't. Cubs have been good at that with pitchers, especially.
Well, they better fix it soon.
Yeah, right.
Well, I mean, I guess for all the Cubs pitching, and to your point, we're guys who love baseball and follow it, and I've covered it for 32 years before Angelos threw me out of the clubhouse 10 years ago. So I don't talk to baseball players as much as I used to in my youth. But I will say this: we think of them as like the back of a baseball card, and there's some sort of consistency. You see a guy do something for a year or two or three, and you just say, well, that guy's good for 22 home runs. He's going to hit 280. He's going to knock in 90 runs. He's going to be healthy and play 140 or 150 games. And that's not the reality. It's not rotisserie baseball. It's not fantasy league that if you think Arrieta's just going to go out there and pitch to a 1.9 ERA and win 24 games again, that takes a lot of effort. That's not easy to do. And there's a reason it doesn't get done very often.
Well, correct. And I mean, in 15, Arrieta had arguably, you could argue he had the best half of pitchers ever had in the history of baseball, and one of the best full seasons of pitchers ever had in the history of baseball. And so what's everybody going to compare to subsequent years to? They're going to compare it to that. And that's, that's not always. I was talking with Chris Bryant the other day we were actually talking about baseball, and he said, the weird thing about baseball is that players are who they are. They're going to be who they're going to be. And what he meant was things are always going to average out. Whether a guy could be hitting 400 for the first 3 months of the season, but he's not going to hit 400 for the season, so he's going to come back down. There's always a middle ground there where these guys, most of them have established what those numbers, what you can realistically expect those numbers to be. You can't realistically expect Machado to hit 220 every year. That's probably not going to happen unless he has some sort of injury that is never going to heal, or I mean, he's going to come back. He's going to get hot. He's going to, he's proven enough that I think. But these days people lose faith, in 5 seconds. Like, our attention spans just don't allow us to have any patience. And baseball is the very definition of baseball is patience. And so, I mean, it's not football where it's one game a week, or hockey where it's so fast paced. I mean, there's 162 games, and it's. You can have a bad 162 games. I mean, it's happened in the history of baseball, and it'll happen again.
He is Paul Scribina. He covers all things baseball for the Chicago Tribune. You can follow him at Shy Trib Scribina. That's SkrBina, and covering the Cubs and the White Sox, and certainly for the Orioles. Boy, that was an ugly weekend at Yankee Stadium, bro. I mean, you go up there, they start laying 15s and 18s on you. Woo, fear the Yankees is what I would say to everybody this summer, right?
I don't disagree, and I didn't think it was going to take them long to figure it out. With the Chapman trade to the Cubs last year, they took the Cubs' best prospect, and knowing they were going to get Chapman back. And I know he's hurt now, but and the Cubs had something to do with that, I believe. But anyway,
and they're also going to have money when it's all over with too to spend. Which every time Machado goes to New York, they always have some image of him, what he would look like in pinstripes. We get to see that out on the internet. So such is life as an Orioles fan. But hey, you got the Cubs; they're going to keep you warm and fuzzy all summer, and at least you have a pennant race this year, which they don't have in Washington right now.
Oh yeah, they could. I mean, you never know. But I think the Cubs are a pretty safe bet to make the playoffs, just because of how bad their division is, and just because I don't think Kyle Schwarber's going to hit 160 all year. But we'll see.
You're not buying what the Brewers are selling.
I'm not buying what any of the and I think the Cardinals are going to get better. I mean, I think there's just some turmoil there, but that division normally Pittsburgh's usually a lot better than they are this year. And I mean, look at the AL Central. I mean, the Twins. I mean, are the Twins going to last? I tell you one team I did see though over the weekend was the Rockies, and holy cow, are they really good? I don't watch a lot of Rockies games, but I mean, they have one of the best players in the game, and two of the best players in the game, Arenado and Charlie Blackmon, and their young pitchers are just something else. And that's a team that I'm going to keep a lot closer of an eye on after having seen them up close, because and as a fan, I love seeing teams like that.
Well, there's a lot of that going on with young players. Whether it's Houston with what they have with Correa, and obviously the second baseman. You just you can't put superlatives on a guy that is that size, smaller than me, and doing these things in Major League Baseball. But I think for all these teams, and Lindor in Cleveland has been slow. Machado's been slow. Harper had a bad year that last year. He bounced back this year. But the All-Star game, we're going to the All-Star game in Miami next month. It's really flush with a whole new crop of talent. There aren't a whole lot of old farts hanging around now that David Ortiz is gone, right?
And it's fun to watch. It's fun. It's fun. You're watching the evolution of the game, and it's the next wave of players are coming in, and you kind of get to see it evolve all over again. And I mean, to me as a fan, that's as a fan of the game, that's exciting, and it's fun to watch. I find myself watching more players now individually than I ever did, and I grew up watching Ken Griffey Jr. and Frank Thomas and some of those guys, Pedro, and one of my favorite pitchers of all time pitched for the Orioles, Mike Mussina.
He was our favorite too until he went to the Yankees.
Wade Boggs, or not Wade Boggs, but there's been a few guys who've done it. But yeah, I think. Yeah, it's exciting to watch, and like I said, we know more now about these young guys than ever. So, if you're a baseball fan, you just enjoy it.
Well, I'm writing the book this summer on Peter Angelos and the Peter principles of his 25 years. The whole Mussina chapter is illuminating of all the goofy stuff that Angelos said in the media. It was almost like the things that Trump says. You know what I mean? Like these outrageous insults of Mussina before he could even bother signing him. And then, of course, he lowballed him by $14 million in the end. So such is life with Peter Angelos, and such is life with the Orioles here in a summer of discontent right now. Hey, Paul, man, have fun up there on the north side. Get some elotes for me down on the south side when you're at Comiskey, and pick up one of those Italian sausages, too. We'll get out there soon, man.
All right, man. Look forward to it.
Great having you on. Paul Scribina covers all things baseball for the Chicago Tribune. You can follow him out at chicagotribune.com, as well as at Shy Trib Scribina. That's Scribina. You can find me out in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in Illinois, in Wisconsin, in Indiana, wherever you happen to be. You can get us out in the buyatoyota.com Audio Vault. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. I am on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. The Peter Principles, the first 4 chapters are out. The 5th chapter will appear this Friday at WNST.net, and we will share that out. And hopefully you're enjoying the Peter Principles as I release chapter by chapter once a week all summer long the story of the Peter Principles. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.